Coming up on Wrestling Life.
I don't watch wrestling for moves. I watch wrestling for pace. So how are these guys starting? When are they getting into run spots? And how do those run spots transition into the next thing? How are the guys getting out of work holds? There's a lot of things that you can learn. And that's what you really need to be learning is like how to put the match together. Not so much, how can I do a moonsault off the top rope? Because none of the talent scouts care about if you can do a moonsault off the top rope. They're looking at things like footwork and can you put a match together right? And
can you actually hit the ropes like you mean it?
These type of things, yeah.
Welcome to Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that features real talk from real talent.
Here we go again, guys. It is time for another Wrestling Life with me, your host Ben Veal, and some more real talk from real wrestling talent. Now, this is going to be a super fun one today because I have not one, but two very special guests for you. But before I get to my big introduction, two very, very small requests that I must ask you first. If this is your first time tuning in to Wrestling Life, or if you've checked out a few episodes now, then please subscribe to the show. However you enjoy your podcasts, it is the single biggest difference that you can make to us podcasters and allows me to keep bringing you conversations like the one that's coming up for you today. So now, with that being said, I'm so pleased to welcome my guests onto the show today. Inside the squared circle, they are a pro wrestling power couple. And away from the ring, they are newlyweds and two of the nicest people that you'll be lucky enough to meet in this crazy business today. I know that's taken away all of their psycho heat right now. Joining me all the way from North Carolina, my guests are, of course, Psycho Boy Fodder and Angelina Love, the team that is much better known as Psycho Love. Great to see you guys again. How you doing? Welcome to Wrestling Life.
What's up? How's it going?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, much better than the last time we spoke when, in the spirit of being candor and honest, because I ask a lot of my guests, the last time we saw each other, I was passed out on a hotel room floor, having had a bit of a crazy health scare over WrestleMania weekend. And you guys were incredibly kind, incredibly caring, and not quite like your on-screen personas, that's for sure. So thank you for looking after me. My wife says thank you for looking after me.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if you're ever usually like your on-screen character, it's probably not a good thing.
No.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
That's interesting. We were talking off air, but I mean, that was, I think the reason it got to me was just the chaos of a WrestleMania week and how many moving parts there is and how many people there are. And this kind of, I was trying to keep up this crazy schedule of meeting so many different people in so many different places. And, I don't know how you guys do it. I mean, it is literally just a whirlwind, isn't it? The world of wrestling, especially at big events like that.
I prioritize rest. I've never been like a big partier, like, I'd go into the ring drunk from the night before or anything like that, So, I mean, I know how I am and like, I cannot function. I cannot be a happy person. I cannot do my best if I'm not rested. So, I mean, and we've done, UK tours where we fly, overnight and we sleep on the plane and we land and we got to go do a show. And then, you travel to the next country and the next country. And it's like, it really does a number on you if you can't rest. So like, I mean, we would forego eating just to get 3 hours of sleep. You know what I mean? So, and I remember like my first UK tour, I think it was 2009. It was like 11 days, like, I don't know, 6 countries or 7 countries in 11 days or something like that. And I mean, it took me 3 weeks to get over it. By the time I got home, I was just so jet lagged and man, I'd be like, I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, I feel good. And then like 30 minutes later, I'd be like, oh my God, I need to go back to bed. Like, so I kind of know what it's like.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's rough. And I mean, that just depends on, even like this weekend was, a rough, we were doing a booking for GCWA in Corpus Christi, Texas. And it was like our flight out was at, I think 7 a.m. out of Raleigh. And so we're up at, and I'm telling her on Friday night, she's like, you should just come home from the shop and go to bed. And I was like, well, I got to work out. So I go and I work out and I get here and then, we're going to bed at like 11:30 and we're up at what,
3:45.
3:45, and then we're to the airport there, layovers. You get there, you got to do the show, and then our flight back out is at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning.
So we were up at 3:30, and I think we went to bed at like 11:30 or midnight.
Yeah, so we probably got 6 hours or 7 hours of sleep over 3 days.
You do the show. Shows start at, it was a Saturday, so the show started at 7. And this was an ideal situation because the show was in a massive ballroom in a hotel, and we were staying in the hotel. So we could literally just come from our room downstairs, out the elevators. The room was right there. So when we were done, we just got our stuff and went back. But you gotta get yourself to a certain point to perform, and then you gotta come down after, and then you gotta eat. And for me, I gotta take all my makeup off and shower all my tanner off, and he's gotta shower and I gotta shower, and we gotta eat and we gotta come down. And then by the time you're down and ready to get into bed, you got 4 hours of sleep before you go home. And then we had layovers, a layover on the way home, and there was delays, and then we had to go pick up our new puppy on the way back, and we didn't get, what I mean? So it's a lot, especially when you have kids and pets and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's crazy. And it was funny because I was at WrestleMania for, I think I was away in Philly for 11 nights in total. And so my wife was at home with both kids for that entire time. And of course, the second I got back and walked through that door, she was like, right, hot tag, I'm out of here, kind of thing.
Oh, sure.
She'd booked me in a whole weekend of scheduling, and the very first thing I had to do was take my youngest son swimming at 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. And I fell asleep by the pool. He was in the middle of his instruction. I was sound asleep because I was so jet lagged. It took me days to recover. And that's, I haven't got to work. That's just, settling back into normal life.
It's a different life when you have kids too, because when I was just single me with no kids or anything, and just living in Florida, I could do 2 shows or 3 shows on a weekend, with 3 hours of sleep in between. Man, I would just come home. I'd land at home at 11 a.m. and I'd just go to bed.
Yeah.
I'd go to sleep, for 3, 4, 5 hours and just recover. But it's that doesn't happen when you have children that are well rested and ready to go when you come home from work.
And I'm new to the kid life, so
new to the kid life, though. Yeah, but he's seeing how it is.
And how are you finding that?
I mean, it's easy. I mean, it may be easy because her son. I mean, when I met him, he was 5 turning 6. Yeah.
6, and then he turned 6.
And now he's 8. So I think all the early stuff that happens, the newborn baby and the terrible twos and everything else that goes along with that. I haven't experienced that, but just as far as just being involved and, being there or giving advice when advice is needed. That stuff's really easy, man.
Well, he's done very well because his whole entire life really had no plans on having kids. And then we came into his life, with a 6-year-old. So I will give him props. He has embraced a parental role very well.
No, that's awesome. But also, don't worry, you've got plenty to come, my friend. Don't be complacent that you've got an 8-year-old and it's easy, because you've got the teenage years coming up. So you've got a wild ride ahead.
I'm not even ready for them. So
So look, I mean, the time we're recording this, April 2024, you guys are, very much to say you are newlyweds. I mean, you're 6 months into this world of married life or thereabouts.
Yeah, almost 7, but it feels like forever.
Yeah. I mean, we'll be together going on 2 years here in just a couple of months. So, I mean, it's very easy, or it has been very easy for her and I. I mean, once we just kind of started talking, it was kind of like I was talking to the female version of myself, which makes everything very easy because she's into all the same things that I'm into. We kind of got the same sense of humor on a lot of things. And I mean, we just started talking and never stopped talking. So, I mean, literally since the day we met, I mean, we've kind of just been together every day since.
Yeah, there hasn't been a day where we haven't talked since the first day we talked.
You guys met at an NWA show, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was after the 74 weekend in St. Louis, which is where I used to live. And so it was like Saturday pay-per-view, Sunday pay-per-view, and then Monday morning, 5-hour drive to Nashville for TV Monday, TV Tuesday, TV Wednesday. So that, you know what I mean? Like even just that and the fact that I could drive there and drive home. I mean, man, just, you know, I'm 42, like I just do not recover like I used to. And just speaking about like the need to rest and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, the stuff I was doing at 27, if I do half that now, I'm just like,
Yeah.
man, like it's just, I wrestled 5 days in a row and I was like, oh my God, I don't even remember the last time I've done this. It's been probably, you know, 12 years and it was a lot, but they didn't come to the St. Louis shows. So the Saturday, Sunday, they weren't at that, but then he was at TV the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Nashville. So that's when we met.
EC3 worked the pay-per-view. That was like his first dealio there. And then, I flew into Nashville that Monday. So I was there the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but they had the 2 pay-per-view dates prior to that. So that's a long loop, man, 5 days.
So talk me through how it starts then. So did you know Angelina from kind of the old TNA days and all that kind of stuff?
No, I never watched TNA at all, man. Okay. I went through periods like with wrestling, like I've always been a huge fan of wrestling ever since I was small. And even so, like, it's kind of funny. My art teacher, when I was in middle school, was an indie wrestler. And he knew that I was, you know, that I just love wrestling. Like anything that we would do dealing with art, I would be drawing wrestling, you know, wrestling related things.
Same as me.
And he was just kind of working around everywhere, like, you know, NWA Wildside. And like, there used to be a promotion that ran here in North Carolina called Southern Championship Wrestling. A lot of guys worked there, like C.W. Anderson and Lodi and Shane Helms. You know, so he kind of had introduced, I didn't know anything about indie wrestling in 6th grade or 7th grade. And he kind of would tell us about the indie stuff, and my old man would take me up to the indie wrestling to watch it. And then he got me into wrestling school when I was 16. And then the people who ran the wrestling school found out that I wasn't 18. I think he lied and got me in there. And they told me that I couldn't come back. And then I just got off doing other things. And, you know, as you get older, I was just kind of in and out of watching wrestling. Like, you know, there would be periods where I would go, you know, a year and I wouldn't watch it. And he was actually working for TNA, had done a lot of shots like in the early TNA before she got there. So I never really watched TNA during that time period. You know, like when I first met Matt Sydal, I didn't even know who Matt Sydal was. Like me and him were just kind of talking about supplements and things like that. And people had told me like, oh, like, yeah, I mean, he gets around and stuff. And the first time I met him, I was just like, oh, like I heard you get around a lot. And I just had no idea that he was like a WWE guy and that he had, you know, wrestled at WrestleMania and all those kind of things. So same kind of thing with her. I just saw her in the hallway at NWA and I just went right up to her and I was just like, hey, like, you know, my name's Merton. Like, what's your name? And we just kind of never stopped talking from that point.
Well, now he had followed me on Instagram months prior, so he had seen me.
Okay.
But then I did not follow him back, so then he unfollowed me.
Yeah.
But like, I don't ever check my follows. Like, it's just like somebody and 136 other people have followed you. So like, I don't ever like sit there and like look through. I'm not on my Instagram every day. So, he had told me that and I thought that I was like, why did you unfollow me? But I had seen his stuff.
So he didn't slide into your DMs, as the kids say then.
He did not.
No, I just followed her.
Missed opportunity,
like,
man.
Well, I know. I mean, I just followed her. I mean, we were doing, I think during around that time period, we were doing all the CYN stuff. So we were on the road doing all those shows. And I mean, I don't remember, but maybe somebody mentioned her to me or whatever. And maybe I went to her page and followed her. And I mean, she never followed me back. So I was just like, well, I'm not wasting a follow on this chick right here. I'm just going to get this right off my feed.
Yeah. And I mean, I had known who he was due to the CYN stuff because I've known EC3 for like over 10 years. So I was following the CYN stuff. And then, you know, Vinny was kind of doing like that, the righteous thing in Ring of Honor. And we were talking about like, you know, me kind of doing like a baby Firefly character. And when WrestleMania was in Dallas 2 years ago, they had done a CYN show there. And I was going to like pop in and watch the show because Vinny and Bill were on it. But then I had brought my son was there and we were just tired and we were in the hotel. So I just never ended up going. So there was 2 times where him and I were under the same roof together. WrestleMania in Dallas in 2022. We were literally in the same aisle at WrestleCon, but I saw the CYN table, but I never saw him there. I saw EC3, I saw Strowman, but I never saw him. And we were like just at opposite ends of the room. And then the last Ring of Honor pay-per-view, when Braun Strowman came out and he came out, and I think Weston Blake and because EC3 had a match. I never saw him in the building or backstage or anything there either. And then, so that was December 2021.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was first, right? That was December 2021.
Yeah.
And then was Dallas 2022?
Dallas was 20.
Yeah. And then we ended up meeting so we saw each other in December 2021. Well, we were in the same building, but we never saw each other. And then we were in the same room in April 2022 and never saw each other. And then we met in August of 2022 at NWA.
See, I love that because I mean, I'm a very, very big kind of believer in fate and that people are meant to meet each other at the time they're meant to meet each other. Like my wife of, God, what's it been now? 17 years. You know, we met on a train, like a really, really busy, crowded train, because both of our trains had been cancelled or delayed. And so neither of us were supposed to be on the train we were at the time we were.
Right.
If it hadn't been a busy train, I would have just gone on my seat because I'm a real introvert and I don't really like to speak to people when I travel. So, but we were like literally stuck like that together because there was no other room. So awkward, we had to talk, and you know that's my life partner and the mother of my kids. So same as you guys, like it was going to happen.
Oh, I know, it's great. I love stories like that. How
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I was supposed to be here, but something happened and diverted. That's just life. You know what I mean? Like getting you to the place where you're supposed to be.
So Merton comes up to you straight in with a pickup line of his name, you know, goes straight in there. What comes next?
Well,
then?
I had seen him from behind. I had seen him from behind because like where the girls are, it's like kind of like there's all these rooms here in this area where there's like some couches and chairs and like, you know, a couple TVs to watch the show. And then there's like the main hallway here, which is where they set up the food. And then over here is like a huge room where all the guys are like all spread out changing. And it's this huge locker room. So, I mean, like girls were always in and out because we're hanging out and there's another monitor in there. And one of the refs would like adjust people and stuff like that. So I was in there probably like talking to like Taven and Bennett and like Dalton Castle. He lived in Nashville, so he would always come by. And those were like my Ring of Honor buddies. And then I remember coming out and I had just seen him. He was standing in the food line, of course.
Yeah, you gotta eat.
He was waiting in the food line and I just saw him from behind and I was like, that's that Psycho Boy guy. But then I just had to go back to my locker room and like keep doing my hair. So I just kind of went like over here. And then it was just after that, I think there was a talent meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's when he said hi.
Well, that's it. And how soon from that till you started dating?
Well, I mean, that was Monday. So we just like kind of talked a little bit at TV on Monday and like talked a little bit more at TV on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, everybody kind of like just went out at night. Like we went to like this arcade game place in Nashville with Taven because Taven always finds somewhere to go wherever he travels to. So like a bunch of us had just gone out and like him and I just kind of like pieced out over here and we're just playing games and
yeah.
That was
I
it.
mean, yeah. I mean, that was. I mean, maybe a couple of weeks after that, we went to Washington, D.C. And then, I mean, after that, it was just, I mean, full on all the time. And then we kind of got into discussing, like, you know, I had brought her the idea. I was like, oh, like, it might be cool, like, if you manage me or something like that. And then that's kind of how we came up with, like, Psycho Boy, Psycho Girl, and kind of got that going.
Hey guys, it is Hardcore Country and 11-time Women's World Champion Mickie James. And gentlemen, we have a problem. Recent studies have shown that testosterone levels are falling in men across the globe. Low testosterone is linked to depression, low sex drive, and weight gain, so it's really important to stay on top of it. Now, you could go to a TRT clinic, but let's face it, it's expensive, awkward, and most cases not even necessary. You just need to stimulate your body's own natural testosterone production. That's why it's time to check out the ultimate test stack at legacysubs.com. The majority of testosterone release occurs while you sleep, which is why the ultimate test stack features our best-selling sleep aid, Recovery PM. So Test X9 stimulates testosterone, T-Assist inhibits estrogen, and Recovery PM gives you the best night's sleep you've ever had. You're gonna feel like a new man after trying the ultimate test stack for 30 days, I guarantee. And if you don't believe me, check out all the verified 5-star reviews on Top Rated. Legacy Sports Nutrition is founded by myself and my husband, 3-time world champion and SmackDown general manager, Nick Aldis. We personally use these products ourselves, and if you need more assurance, they are NSF certified, third-party lab tested, and made in the USA in an FDA inspected facility. And because you listen to this show, you can save 10% off your entire order at legacysubs.com now by using the code WrestlingLife at checkout. That's WrestlingLife, all caps, don't forget, and legacysubs.com, LEGACYSUPPS.com. It's time to level up with Legacy.
So like you're obviously, you're working together, you're living together, you're traveling together. Are you training together as well?
Yeah, we work out together.
Yeah.
Do you mean like working out, or you mean like wrestling?
Working out. Yeah. So like that's a lot of together time, but you're still very much in a marital bliss, because I could spend an hour with my wife and that'd be enough in a day, I think, probably at this stage of our marriage. And
oh, sure. But we're actually like best friends. So I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, we actually like it. It's like weird if we don't, like, even if he goes and works at, the shop, I'll FaceTime him for like 3 hours and I'll just be doing whatever around the house or wherever I need to go. And he's at the shop and we're on the FaceTime. So like we actually like enjoy hanging out and doing things together. It's kind of weird when we don't.
It's very weird when we don't. I mean, just because we're together all the time. I mean, we literally do everything together. So, I mean, if we weren't doing things together, I mean, that would be very awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing with, obviously, you're both in this business. So you both know the kind of crazy duality that comes with, being these larger than life characters in a ring 1 minute and then being normal people the next. And I guess you just kind of get used to that kind of lifestyle where you're always kind of one thing or the other, and where you're always recognizable, and you've always kind of got to be on it for fans, but at the same time you need to have your own downtime and your own interests.
But it's easy. I mean, at least for me, I mean, it's really easy to just turn it on when it's time to turn it on, right? So it's like, when we get ready to walk out and we're going to do the show, I mean, I can be totally normal, just hanging out, kicking it in the back with the boys. And then when it's just time to go out, I mean, you can just hit the switch and just become the character. And the moment I walk out and they start booing, or, I start jacking with the fans a little bit, I mean, it's a breeze from that point.
It's always something about just getting through the curtain. You know what I mean? Like if you're like anxious backstage and you're like, you got a lot of anticipation or whatever, everything just like melts away when you get out the curtain, because it's like, it's showtime. So it's literally like an on button and an off button. Like you're just like, because I remember I was always told in TNA that I seemed like too calm and like too quiet, because, a lot of people are like going around and they're trying to like hype themselves up or whatever. And, Velvet and I were like larger than life characters. And I'd just be standing backstage, just like going over like what I need to do in my head. And then you go up there and you're just like, hey, you just like turn it on when you get out there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Because I mean, you and you and Velvet had such a badass entrance for so many years. It's amazing that you can literally just snap into that at a moment's notice.
Literally what we do. You literally just snap into it.
Yeah, and for you, Mercer, like you're one of like calmest, most chilled people I've met, and the fact that you can just suddenly go into psycho boy mode at a moment's notice, that's awesome. That's a skill.
I'm a very relaxed person all the time. So, just going out. I mean, you kind of get what the people in the audience give you, right? So like, man, I mean, like when I walk out and it's booing right off the bat, I'm like, ooh, this is exactly what I want right now, and that gives me the energy to give them stuff, So, I mean, we're all kind of feeding off of each other to make the performance what it is.
And that's why being a heel is the best. It's so much easier than being a baby face, because it's like, man, if you have like a not very energetic crowd and you're a baby face and you're like spending all your energy, like trying to get everybody up and trying to get people to clap and get behind you, and people are just sitting on their hands or just whatever, you know what I mean? That's the worst. That's why when you're a heel, you can just go out there and just be like, nah, like whatever, and just like jack with people. And like usually when you start jacking with people, they're going to jack back with you. They're going to find the energy. Like if you tell them off, they're going to say something back to you. And then if for any reason like the crowd just sucks, it's still just better to be a heel, because you can just tell them how much they suck. Like a baby face can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, and typically there's always, even if you don't have a great crowd, and I don't mean in terms of size, because sometimes you can have a large crowd and they're just quiet, man.
And sometimes you can have, a very small crowd, but they're loud the whole time, and it seems like there's a lot more people there.
Yeah. But I mean, you'll always find one that will, jaw with you. And when that happens, normally it starts to radiate across the room. Other people will start to feel more comfortable getting involved. I mean, even like this weekend, like
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, right off the bat, like when we made our entrance and got in the ring and we're kind of getting things going, she just tapped me and she said, the guy with the mask is the one to jack around with. And right away, I just went to him, and it just spread across the room. Because sometimes when you go to places like this weekend in Corpus Christi, we were like one of the names that they brought in. So sometimes when you go places like that and people are seeing you and they have watched you on like an actual wrestling program, they want to cheer you. But our job is that we need them to boo us. So if I can just find the one guy in the crowd, or she can tell me or whatever, then it becomes very easy, because it's very easy to turn the crowd against you.
And, when I was doing TNA and doing indies, because we were always allowed to go do shows and stuff, I had that a lot, where promoters would be like, I know my crowd, like you're on TV, they're going to want to cheer you. Like you have to be a baby face. And I was like, trust me, I can make people hate me. I'm like, I can make them boo me. Trust me.
Yeah, I guess boo me in the ring and then come by the gimmick table afterwards, isn't it? It's like
they always do. Yeah.
And they always do. And I mean, we always have a great line, man, at the gimmick table whenever we're done performing.
Well, and that's what's so important too about like, which you don't see a lot these days from, independent wrestlers, is you have to pay attention to the crowd, because you want people to be emotionally invested in you. And if you don't pay any attention to them, like, why should they pay any attention to you just because you're performing? Like, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? Yeah. They want to be involved. They want to be called Four Eyes. They want to be, you know what I mean? Like, cause then it's like, oh, like everyone's paying attention to me. Like, oh my gosh. And it gets them interacted, and then that will probably make them want to come to your table too. But it's like, it just makes your job easier. So that's why, like, when we did the entrance, there was this guy who was standing up who had like a Rey Mysterio mask on. And I was like, that's the one, because like you want to find them and use them. Because then, I mean, like that helps us get our stuff over too,
Yeah.
Well, and the thing you notice, at least the thing that I've noticed, is when you look at a card and say you're further up on the card, like I think this weekend we were like the semi-main event, right? And you're looking at the matches that are going on prior to you. Matches where wrestlers do not interact with the crowd. I mean, the crowds are
quiet,
very quiet, for their matches. So it's like I would rather do 50% less stuff in the match and have the crowd interacting with me. Because visually it's better on camera if the crowd is into it, than to do just tons of stuff and they're just quiet.
And usually promoters will come up to us and be like, oh man, like your match was the one where the crowd was like the loudest, or like they were definitely like the most up for you guys. And that's like, well, it's because we mess with them, you know, like makes everything a lot easier.
For sure.
Well, I know we come from the same place in terms of the product we love, because I heard you when you're on the Reffing It Up podcast with Brian and Jimmy. I know you were talking about your love of like mid-90s WWF, which was my sweet spot, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one thing I think is, you know, there's a lot of a kind of hangover from the Attitude Era still 25 years on, in terms of that was the time when suddenly what it was to be a face and what it was to be a heel suddenly became very, very blurry. And I still think 25 years on, we're struggling with this kind of who is a true heel and who is a true face. And yeah, I think, you know, when you can properly go in there and work a crowd and really get them to hate you, that's where the magic is. And I don't think you see enough of that in wrestling anymore. You see so much kind of, you know, Canadian destroyers on a ring apron, all that kind of crazy spot fest, but enough of like that pure visceral hatred, you know?
That's the thing, is that, you know, today it's become like who can do the most cool moves. So you've got heels going out there doing all these wild, impressive shit for, you know, things for the pop. And then it's like, let's take Swerve Strickland, for instance. Like, he was a heel in AEW, but then everybody started cheering him, just like John Cena. When he was a babyface, everybody started booing him. And when The Rock was the heel, they were booing him, and then they started cheering. So it's hard, because it's like, when you're a heel and you start doing stuff that like really gets you over, then people start cheering you and loving you, you know, and then you're not getting that same reaction anymore. And then like sometimes when you're a babyface and you've been doing the same thing for so long, people get bored with it and they just start booing you. And then it kind of like, so the fans can be kind of the reason why sometimes you get switched from like one thing to the other, you know, than what you're trying to do. But I think back in the day, the heels were definitely more like ground and pound, like no nonsense. And it was just the baby faces who were the ones doing all the big high flying, this and that. And I think the heels are doing that more now. And so I don't know. I think it just kind of like messes with like the whole way that a match is supposed to go, because then you've just got everybody cheering for everybody and nobody's really emotionally invested one way or the other. And then sometimes that'll just make them quiet.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's very hard to build stories around it too, right? So, you know, wrestling is all about stories. And that's the whole thing. And me and her were talking, and you know, like I told her once, I said, you know, wrestling is the actual in-ring wrestling is just a vehicle to further the stories. You know, so you got to be a good performer in the ring and all that. But the actual like in-ring stuff is just, it's literally just there to further the story along, right? So people want to see the stories. And if the crowd is basically just kind of like split, just watching like two guys do stuff, there's just, I don't know how you build a story around it, because it's just guys just doing matches, or cold matches, or, you know, however you want to refer to it. So the stories are very, very important, and having that clear distinction of this guy is a bad person and this guy is the guy trying to do the right thing. However you want to build that story is as old as time.
Yeah, and the difference between the product now versus the product that, you know, the three of us grew up watching was, you know, mid-90s WWF. You know, you'd have a bunch of promos, bunch of pre-records, you'd have loads of squash matches with the heel just decimating enhancement talent, and you'd build for months and months and months, sometimes even a year, for that big payoff match. And now it's like feud begins on Friday, Monday the match is happening, and then it's
that's the worst.
It's that pace, isn't it? Yeah, it's the lack of. Yeah. I think that's why everyone gravitated towards WrestleMania over the last couple of years, is because of the payoff of a long-term storytelling. Whereas if if that whole Cody storyline had happened 10 years ago, he'd have been champion in 2 months. Like, it's this, finally we're almost starting to go back to basics in terms of why we became fans in the first place when we were young,
Yeah.
but we don't.
Well, I mean, that's, WWE is really good at that. Like, a lot of places won't even really, they'll be like, oh, our story goes from Friday to Monday. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, like, you could get like 6 months out of this. Like, WWE can do a storyline for 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
And draw it out. That's wrestling.
It is. I wanted to talk about something you said a little while ago about TNA, because one thing I always thought was great about TNA was the fact that they did allow those independent bookings to happen, which is obviously something that WWE's never really done. You're under WWE's umbrella. You're there, and we've kind of seen that model to a degree with AEW now. But how important was that to you to become a much more rounded performer than if you'd just been in the Impact Zone every week?
Well, I mean, if we're going to be real here, like, I mean, WWE pays people enough to be able to just be with them all the time. I don't really think anybody else like touches that. I mean, I'm sure like AEW now with the kind of money that some people are getting there. But I mean, like, there was just, when you're on TV, you can also get a lot more signings, girls especially, man, signings, conventions, appearances. But like they couldn't really say like, hey, we're paying you this like excruciatingly high amount of money to where you can like overly comfortably live off of it and you don't need to work anywhere else. But I mean, so they weren't really in a position, except for probably a few people, you know what I mean, to say like, hey, you can't go like do anything else or like make any money elsewhere. But so, and then like, that was really good because like, man, like we could go out and make a lot more money, like doing indies and doing signings and like selling merch and stuff like that. Cause we were actively on TV.
Yeah.
But it was different because we were so used to because we were kind of in a bubble in the sense that for the most part, we were just working the same 6 or 7 girls all the time. So we all could just work each other in our sleep. So we liked the ease of that. The only difference was then when you go work somebody on the indies, you're just like, oh, geez, I have no idea what I'm in for, Yeah,
but it must also be great for the variety that actually you've got someone new to dance with rather than the same. I mean, you had incredible dance partners in TNA, but there are only so many times that you can do the same, do a fresh polish to the same match, isn't there? Really.
Yeah, but I mean, we didn't mind because it just made work really easy. You know what I mean? Because we had a writing team, we had people, we had storylines, there was different things going on. So we just liked the ease of our job, just being able to work with each other. It was really easy. Like nobody that we worked with was like the one person who was like, oh man, this person's so difficult. Like, I don't want to do this. It was like everything was easy. And that's kind of, I mean, like, I think that should be how you want your job to be, where it's just, you just go there and it's easy, Well,
and when you're working good people all the time, that's easy, man. You can put matches together very easy, and the other person is totally competent. They're there for everything. When you get out and you're working on the indies and you're not working, people that are on TV all the time, there's a lot of good lessons that you can learn. Moose told me one time, he said, every now and again, you got to work somebody who's really bad. He said, because he said, when you're working a guy who's really bad, or it's just really off the rails, it teaches you all the things you have to do to get it back on the rails and to get through the match, right? So like, if you're always working people that are good, you're never really put in that situation. But say you go somewhere and the match is not great and you're having to get the guy through it and you're having to remember everything for him and everything for you. And it puts you on the spot right there to fix it. And the only way you can get that experience is for that to happen to you. So that if that ever does occur anywhere else, you start to just become very good at doing it. And you can just get things back on track very quickly. So, I mean, working people that are not great is not always a terrible thing. It's not great while it's happening, but you learn a lot from it.
Sure.
It's the old wrestling a broomstick analogy, isn't it? That they used to always say about Ric Flair or Bret Hart, that they could wrestle anyone and make them look great.
Oh yeah, man, no doubt.
The only thing that's hard is that makes it difficult would be is if the person is just actively fighting against you and just like not listening and like not trying to relax. We kind of teach people that in training class because they're just so like, you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't be like that, man.
Yeah. Do you think Merton it's helped you the fact that because obviously you looked to get into wrestling when you were 16, that didn't pan out. You then went off and ran your supplements companies for a number of years. You come into wrestling at 33, I believe, is that right?
Yeah.
So I mean, going back a couple of decades, that would have been super old to enter wrestling. But when we're in an era where like AJ Styles is like doing some of his best work at like 46, I don't think we're in the same ballpark anymore when it comes to age. But you're a few years into the wrestling business now. Angelina's coming up to 25 years. I mean, crazy how much experience you've got. How do those kind of two perspectives come in terms of kind of complementing each other and what you teach one another in the world of wrestling?
Well, the interesting thing about him is that for the short number of years that he's actually been in wrestling, he works like somebody who's been doing it for 15 years. You know what I mean? It's just some people just get it. And he was definitely that, but he's also like a student of the game. He is watching it all the time and learning it all the time. And then just us being together, took that to a different level for him too. So, I mean, like anybody who sees him work or who works with him thinks he's been wrestling probably 10 times longer than he actually has.
Yeah.
That was actually, I worked Heath at All-Star Wrestling in West Virginia. And we had a really good match. And the match is on my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/psychoboyfodder. We worked that match. And when we got done, he came to the back and he goes, man, this match was great. And he goes, how long you been wrestling? And I said, like 3 years. And Heath was like completely flabbergasted. He was like, dude, you wrestle like a guy's been wrestling for 10 years. Which was like the biggest compliment that I could ever got from him because like, my buddy works at the radio station here in town and he used to get us like free tickets to go to like WWE and stuff like that. So like, dude, like guys that I've wrestled like Damian Sandow or Heath, these are guys that I actually went and saw live, like at WWE events, So to have them compliment me, knowing that the amount of experience that they have is a big deal for me, and definitely means a lot to me.
I think Homicide said that to you in NWA too, right?
Yeah, Homicide said that too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that comes down to age, that you kind of entered into this business with much more maturity than if you'd come into it at 18?
Well, now I will tell you one. Yeah, it's age, right? When I had a lot of life experience before I ever got involved in wrestling, right? So like a lot of 20-year-olds that are getting into wrestling don't know how to conduct themselves. Whereas when you enter wrestling at 33 or 34, it's much easier to know how to conduct yourself and know how to do business with people and what you can say and what you can't say around people. I mean, it's just age experience, right? But I don't know, man. I mean, it's just, I think watching wrestling for as long as I've watched wrestling, I talked to the guy who I was telling you about, who was my art teacher. We still keep in contact quite regularly. And, he told me, he said, man, you're so much better than guys that have been doing it in the same amount of time as you. He said, because he said, you might not understand this. He said, but the amount of time that you spent watching wrestling and that you spend watching wrestling now, he said, but more so all the younger years that you watching wrestling from, 3 years old until 17 years old. He said, man, you got all that time of tape watching experience. So he said, whether you know it or not, subconsciously, you've just been ingesting pro wrestling for 20 years and watching it nonstop. He said, so it's easy for you to remember or have in your head how to sell a punch or how to take a bomb or how to do any of these type of things. He said, because all you've been doing is just hammering your brain with wrestling that you've watched for 20 years. And you see a lot of guys that get into it now. I mean, like, I was working with a kid, just like in a training school match. And I took him to the corner and I'm calling the match to him. So, I mean, all I really have is the, what the cutoff spot is and what the finish is going to be. Because calling it in training matches allows me to just get better at just calling it in the ring, And I put him in the corner. This is like the first spot. It's a lock up 20 seconds into the thing. Put him in the corner and I just go, hey man, I need you to duck this punch. So he ducks the punch and I turn around and he just starts firing on me like crazy, right? Like he's like going like Superman on me 20 seconds into the match. And I just stopped the match and it just made me think to myself, I go, what would make you do that? Now, it could be a lot of things. It could be excitement. It could be being nervous. There's a million things, right? But it makes me go, have you ever seen that happen 20 seconds into a match? Maybe if the guy's got history or something like that and they've been working a program for 6 months. But, rarely you see stuff like that. And it made me think to myself, like, I mean, have you ever watched wrestling before? So I think just that you really got to inundate yourself with it and watch it. And, like I've told her plenty of times, I'll get up in the morning and do cardio for 35 minutes and maybe I'll watch 2 matches or 3 matches, depending on what the time length of the match is. But, I don't watch wrestling for moves. I watch wrestling for pace. So how are these guys starting? When are they getting into run spots? And how do those run spots transition into the next thing? How are the guys getting out of work holds? There's a lot of things that you can learn. And that's what you really need to be learning is like how to put the match together. Not so much, how can I do a moonsault off the top rope? Because none of the talent scouts care about if you can do a moonsault off the top rope. They're looking at things like footwork and can you put a match together right? And
can you actually hit the ropes like you mean it?
These type of things, yeah.
It's Ben Veal here, host of Wrestling Life. This show is all about real talk from the talented individuals who shaped wrestling's past, present and future. And when it comes to honouring wrestling's past, I have to give a quick shout out to the great team and our friends at bigbluecage.com. Big Blue Cage Wrestling Store is your one-stop online shop for some truly awesome wrestling gear. Big Blue Cage's replica championship belts include the very best designs from the Golden Era, New Generation and the Attitude Era, including the much beloved Winged Eagle belt, the iconic Intercontinental Championship, which in my humble opinion is the greatest belt design of all time, the Attitude Era Big Eagle, and even the Big Gold belt. All available either in CNC or deep hand-etched plates and with real leather straps. And that's not all. Big Blue Cage are also the exclusive stockists of other old school items that I absolutely love, including WWF, WCW and old school Hasbro sock sets, and the one accessory that every wrestling fan's car needs, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage wiper blades. It's time for the mega powers to explode once again. With UK and worldwide delivery options available and custom designs accepted, head on over now to bigbluecage.com.
And that's what we kind of tell people too, whether we do like seminars or if we help out in a training class. It's like, like we just did this the other day and we asked people like, are you actually like right now watching wrestling? Any kind of wrestling from 30 years ago, 20 years ago, today, whatever. And like, of course, everybody was like, yeah, I watch 7 to 10 matches a day. And we were like, no, you don't. Like nobody does. You know what I mean? Like if you have like a job in any type of life, like you're not like this guy watches wrestling every day and he's watching maybe like 2. And let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they are watching. It's like, they're certainly not watching to learn psychology or pacing or anything like that, because we will actually watch these people's indie matches and it's just, you do 2 moves, I do 2 moves, you do 2 moves, I do 2 moves. There's not like a clear heel and a clear baby face all of a sudden they'll just be in the heat and we'll just be like, wait a minute, what was the cutoff? Like, did I like just zone out and like miss the cutoff? Like, what was the cutoff? And it's just, and then the people aren't getting into it because it's not put together properly and stuff like that. So I think these days, because wrestling has just become so move based and who can do the most moves and the coolest moves and stuff like that, that whole story and trying to get people emotionally invested gets a little lost. And we feel it watching it. We're just like we want to cheer for you now, but you're like not giving us the reason to do it. You're not paying attention to us. We put ourselves in like a fan's position. You know what I mean? So we kind of know what it feels like to be the ones watching. So then when we're out working, we know, oh, this is the time where where we need to have pay attention to the people, right, and, draw them in and stuff like that.
And you got to know things, I mean, it's just paying attention to basic things. You can feel it, man. If you're not like in your head, like a lot of guys will go in the ring and they're in their head and they never see outside of what's going on in the wrestling ring. Cause they're like, man, I got to remember like 50 things. And, there's too much planning for the matches. I mean, you can plan, but what I mean by that is like, it's like we've put this thing together and there's no way we can go off of this course because this is what we've got put together. No matter how the crowd reacts, we're doing this thing right here, right? Whereas, sometimes you got to know, and like I say, you can really feel it when you're there and you're getting heat on a guy and the crowd's there and I can go, time to go home because I've beat this guy down enough, and you can feel that the crowd is ready for him to make that comeback, right? And it's like, if you keep going, it just, you lose it. Arn Anderson told me this one time. He said, when you got them, he said, when they're here, he said, got to take it home, man. He said, because if you get them here and then you do a cover and the guy kicks out, he said, you'll never get them back here. He said, when they come down from you doing that extra kick out to do two more things, he said, you'll never get them back to where you had before. So it's just having that feeling where, maybe there's two more things planned, but if that guy's made a super crazy comeback on you and he's going over and he hits you with something and they get the huge pop, it's like, man, you might just want to tell him when you're laying there, like, dude, just pin me. Yeah. Like, let's go home now, but a lot of guys won't do that. They're just like, I've got this course written out and we have to do A through Z and we're not deviating from that. And
we've seen before too, that people don't even know how to deviate. And I remember like these two guys I had to talk to one time, and because they went 4 minutes over, and I was like, man, if you do that at TV, your ass is getting fired when you come to the back. At a minimum, you're going to get chewed out and probably beat in 30 seconds the next week on TV. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to listen, but it's like, they'll have so much contrived stuff that they've memorized so hard and they have to do it. They don't even know how, even when they're getting a time cue, to just stop it right there or give themselves 30 seconds to cut all this stuff out and get to where they need to be. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff you have to learn if you want to work on TV. I know this for a fact, and I'm like, whenever I do a match, I'm like, it's like, I got a plan A and I got a plan B. And that's usually in like the latter part of the match, just depending on where we are time-wise. You know what I mean? If me as a heel, if I have more time, once I get to a certain spot to do a little bit more so we can hit the time, then I will. If we're, a minute ahead of where we thought we would be, then it's like, okay, we're sitting in the hold and right there, we're just going to figure out what to cut out. But people don't do that. They're just like, we just have all these things and we just have to hit them and we can't deviate and we can't, but they also just don't know how either, because everything's so intricately like this and like that. There's no point where you can break it and cut this off and then get where you need to be. And like, people need to think about that because that's TV, man. Like, I'm telling you, man, you just cannot go somewhere and go 4 minutes over and just do that all the time and think it's okay, because it's not.
I wonder, I mean, not to kind of, talk down the current product, but, we're all children of, kind of 90s wrestling. So we grew up with these slow build matches that built to a slow crescendo and had a real payoff. And I do wonder whether, talking about people watching tape, whether people coming into the business now just aren't familiar with the kind of pacing of a 80s or 90s wrestling match.
Probably not.
No, they're probably just
Probably
watching
not.
what they see on TV right now. And that's just what they're trying to do. Because, I mean, we've seen, gosh, there's a whole generation of people who tried to wrestle like the Young Bucks. You know what I mean? And it's like the Young Bucks can wrestle like the Young Bucks. You have to have the speed. You have to have the ability. Not everybody has that. So you see a lot of people trying to do things that they can't do just because they're a fan of it. And you really need to sit there and think about that. Like, you should just do what you're capable of doing and take what you're capable of doing and perfect it. And that will make you look really good instead of trying to do a whole bunch of other stuff that you can't do that you just want to do because you like it. And then you mess it all up.
Well, even like, being at WrestleMania, being there for that live experience over 2 nights, I mean, that probably amounted to 8 hours of wrestling. And nearly all of it was just move, finisher. And then you've got probably the 2 most over people in that company in many regards. You've got Roman Reigns and you've got Gunther, both of whom have just slowed everything down and just let every single move breathe. And you just like, that's the wrestling I love. What hit a move, work for crowd, let it mean something. Like, I'm not necessarily saying go back to the days of 5-minute rest holds, but I do like it when actually a move would be hit and it meant something. And when a finishing move was hit and that was game over, not the first of 5 kickouts. I hope we're going to start to see a reversal of actually that pure storytelling, which is what I think
stories just got so thrown out the window so quickly, especially a place like WWE who just knows it, are like, hold on, pump the brakes. We need to bring this back because this is what really draws people in and makes them stay. WWE is great at the cliffhangers. They're great at stories. They're great at plot twists, all that kind of stuff. And that's why, I mean, shit, man, they're totally killing it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. But again, because they have in the last 2 years really invested back in story. And it's always going to be the same with wrestling, isn't it? It's always going to come down to, do you actually care why these 2 people are doing moves against one another? Because if you don't, what is the point?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And dude, I mean, like, we work at, a couple of big indies that do stories at the indies, and they always have good crowds. They always have good crowds because it's like, this happens and then something else is set up. And I mean, like, I worked Caleb Connolly at a promotion and for a year straight. And then it was like, when I beat him and won the belt, it actually meant something. AML is really good with doing stories as well, man. The other promotion I was talking about was RWA, but AML is very good with doing stories too. Brian Hawks, he's the booker there, and everything that he books there is story based. Like, yesterday we were on the way back, but I mean, they did a show yesterday, and I mean, they probably had 1,000 people there. And that's a North Carolina based promotion, man. So they run the WrestleCade convention as well. So I mean, those guys are fantastic.
I mean, and you're surrounded by so many, awesome people, aren't you, in the Carolinas? I mean, I know that, a mutual friend of ours is Lodi, who's been on the show, and he's an awesome dude. I mean, I know you did a lot of training with Lodi as well. What did he teach you about kind of the art of wrestling and storytelling?
Man, he basically he teaches wrestling a lot different. Lodi teaches wrestling a lot different than a lot of people I've been around. And like, every trainer has like their way of teaching wrestling and all that. But I think the main thing I learned from Lodi was there wasn't a whole lot of like, you go to some places and they're very focused on doing like a lot of drills. And Lodi never really did a lot of drills, man. Lodi would make you get in the ring, and he would just tell you guys, he would just be like, you guys just need to wrestle and talk and figure it out. And what that forced you to do is to think on your feet and not go at 100 miles an hour. And through doing that, I mean, I became a much better wrestler. because you're just in there and you're just forced to work and talk to the guy you're working with and figure it out. And a lot of places are not allowing people to just get in there and figure it out. And I think figuring it out on your feet just takes you up many, many notches very quickly too.
And what we kind of see sometimes too is like, it seems like people will train for a lesser and lesser amount of time just to try to get out on the indies faster. But then you're just pumping out a whole bunch of talent who are not good. They don't get it. And nobody's elevating each other. You know what I mean? And that's not good. Because I mean, like back in the day, like maybe like back in my day, like, 25 years ago ish or more, like people would train, their trainers wouldn't even allow them to have their first match until they trained like for a year. Yeah. You know what I mean? And now we're seeing people train for 60 days trying to do matches. And it's like they're training twice a week. And in 60 days, they're like doing shows. And it's just like, it shows in the ring that, but some people are just trying to pump people out there and put their name on them. And I'm like, I don't know. I'd rather put my name on somebody who's really good and really knows what they're doing. Cause like anytime I do seminars, man, all I do is basics, very basic things. And it's like next to nobody has just the basics down. Cause I mean, we were just doing that for hours a day, every day in Deep South. You know what I mean? Just like taking a bump and getting up properly and hitting the ropes and making sure you're coming off with the proper foot first and just actually throwing kicks that look like they hurt somebody, but you're not hurting somebody, the whole art of the pro wrestling and all of that, but it's like, I don't teach people how to do Canadian destroyers and like power bombs and stuff. Cause like when Jay Lethal still has a school, but when I was helping him train at his school in Clearwater, like, in 2014, so probably 10 years ago, I was helping with the girls there. And man, he was just doing that stuff all the time. How do you whip somebody off? How do you take it when you're coming off the ropes? And when you're the person who is doing it, because there's a little do-si-do with your feet and then you got to push them off, but don't really push it. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff. And we would do that for like 2-3 hours. And then at the end, he'd be like, okay, we've got 20 minutes left. Like, who wants to learn how to do like their favorite wrestler's move? You know what I mean? One girl wanted to know how to do the AJ Leash did the octopus submission hold. And so he would do kind of like a fun little, okay, like who wants to do their favorite wrestler's move? And, it would be like a little fun thing at the end, but that would be after, 2 to 3 hours of like learning the basics. And we're literally hearing from a trainer's mouth, like the students are literally saying like, this is boring. I don't want to learn this. Like, when are we going to do the exciting stuff? And it's like, you don't run the class, man. And like, I know for a fact, because I've been doing this for so long and I've done seminars and I've also seen superiors to me watch seminars. They are not looking to see if you can do like a triple, quadruple lutz off the top rope. They want to see, does your lockup look convincing? Can you throw a good punch? Can you do you know what I mean? It's not all the big, wild, crazy stuff, because you can teach people to do that stuff very quickly, but you have to have that foundation first. And everyone just thinks it's boring. And it's like, well, it is. But I mean, like, that's how you get to all the other things you want to do.
Do you teach a lot about character? Because I know when I used to write about TNA, and I used to, be watching the product every single week and kind of critiquing different aspects of the show and thinking a different way to write about it each week. I always used to love, when you Velvet Madison would come out and do a Beautiful People thing, like you guys had the crowd every single time you came out before you even got in the ring. Like your characters were just so down. And do you kind of talk your students through, the art of getting heat, the art of actually being a character, the promos, all that kind of stuff? Or do you focus more on the mechanics in the ring?
Well, I mean, I certainly offer up for people to ask. Like if we're going and doing an indie somewhere and we're doing a seminar, that would be something that would be talked about certainly later on in the seminar, especially if we just have people do like 5-minute matches or whatever. I always tell people, I'm like, give me a clear heel, give me a clear baby face, make it easy as day for us to be able to tell who's who. And then, yeah, like we'll say stuff about like characters. There's not usually a lot of questions about it. But people do have like promo questions, because sometimes we'll do like a promo thing, because that became like my bread and butter too, was just us talking. And I used to be somebody who was scared to death in front of people. So I think I have a really good way of helping people getting from point A to point Z. And obviously, we kind of want to do that more. If there was like one more day in the week or a few more hours in the day, we could do that more. But yeah, like we will, if we have a good chunk of time, help people with promos too. And once again, it's just basic stuff, but it's never anything that people are thinking about. So it's just like, oh wow, and I mean, you just try to help where you can, really.
Yeah. I want to ask you, look, we could talk all day, but I'm conscious of your time. What do you guys do for downtime when you're not in the world of wrestling? Because I mean, you are literally living and breathing this sport. Like, what do you do to switch off as a couple?
Well, I mean, we got a family, you know what I mean? So like we're always doing fun stuff with my son, and we just got a puppy, and we just bought a house in December, and I'm like repainting everything. We've got a huge yard we've been cleaning up. We got a pool. I'm trying to get the water to normal swimming pool water, which has been a complete science project. So we're just a very normal everyday life people, but like you have to have that, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like we like wrestling to be like, it's been my entire adult life, and I mean I've been watching it since I was a kid, so like really it's been my whole life. But like you have to like have the split and like the normal. You can't do that all the time.
But we do a lot of yard detail work, and like occasionally like we watch like documentaries or just different things like that. But we really like doing like the outside, like yard detail work. And
yeah, I mean, we just took David to a local baseball game the other night. We're going strawberry picking after school today, and just totally normal stuff.
Yeah. I'd love to see the two of you strawberry picking. I just think that's wonderful. I think that's a wrestling promo right there. If you don't cut a promo in a strawberry field, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But I also heard you say on this, my other podcast you did, that you guys like, genuinely enjoy watching, like, as you're saying, like mid-90s WWF matches together, which to me sounds like the perfect idea of marital bliss. Do you still enjoy being a fan of wrestling? Like, can you still watch, like, because obviously so many of you've been in it for so long, so many of your friends are involved in this. Can you still like escape into a wrestling match, or is it impossible?
100%. Yeah. I think it takes a little bit more for somebody who's been in the business for so long, just because the other side of the fence, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I live for that, man. I live for crowd reaction, and I love seeing that too. Like when Kofi won the title at WrestleMania a few years ago, like I literally like had like tears of joy for him, because I've known him since he started in Deep South, because I was already there. So when he came in, and I'm good friends with his wife, you know what I mean? So like watching him win that and seeing them in the ring, like I think I had just come back from doing WrestleCon, the signing that weekend. And when I remember I was getting in the shuttle from the airport to go to my car, and I was watching it. I was like, hi, because I love getting like, the goosebumps and still being drawn into it. It's still possible when you've been doing it forever, and you could be really critical of it. But I mean, I live for that, man. Like you want to still be a fan. You want to still get that magical feeling and stuff like that. And it can still be there for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have tons of 90s WWF downloaded like on like my YouTube account. And
we were just watching it on the plane.
We'll watch matches like while we're on the plane. I'll be like, oh, like I got like this old like Owen Hart, Shawn Michaels 97 match. Like we'll watch that for 25 minutes or whatever, but we also enjoy watching really terrible wrestling too. I mean, like the worst stuff I can find on YouTube.
It's readily available.
Yeah. I mean, we get lots of enjoyment out of watching really bad wrestling.
I think where my head exploded at WrestleCon was, I've kind of come up and said hello to you two and a few of the other guys, and then I walk in a room and suddenly there's Doink and Dink and Nails, and like literally there's a Repo Man, and it's like literally all of my childhood just in a room. It's crazy, absolutely crazy, those conventions.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what it was. Well, that's what's really cool about conventions is you can, especially as somebody in the business, you can have somebody that you worked with one time, and man, you haven't seen them in like 3 or 5 years, and then all of a sudden you just see them in New Jersey at this convention that you're doing together, and it's cool. It's just it's a good way for everybody to see each other again. And I mean, I went through like what you just described. I went through all of that in TNA. You know what I mean? Because it was like, I was a huge fan of Sting when I was like 16 and like discovered WCW. And then was watching that, like Sting was one of my favorites. And then like I literally worked with him for like years in TNA, and he like would critique our matches, and we would all just be like, like, what is our life? And like Kurt Angle actually thought I was a really good wrestler. And like, you're just, there's Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And I was like, Diesel and Razor Ramon, like, oh my God. And then like Hogan was there. And I remember sitting in the makeup chair in the makeup room, and like he was walking down the hallway, and I looked, and it was head to toe, red and yellow, the glasses, the bandana, the feather boa. And I was just like, he's walking to, this is Hulk Hogan, who like everybody knows since they were 3 years old, from movies, from WWF. Just he was the everything all around the world man, and he's literally walking right beside me now. He's standing behind me, and he's all in red. It's just like you can't wrap your head around how wild it is.
Cool, haven't you? You've got to be like, yeah, hi Terry, hi. It's like kind of.
Well, he was so cool. I mean, like I like Hogan. Like we always had a really good relationship. And like when we got married, we lived like the day after we went to his bar, because we got married on the honeymoon island in Florida. And so we went to his bar restaurant thing. He does karaoke on Mondays. So we got married on Sunday, and we went there. It was like us and EC3 and Ricky Morton, my friend Christy Vane. And like, there was a whole bunch of us that went, and he does karaoke, and Jimmy Hart was there, and his son Nick was there with his fiance, who's really sweet. And we were all just right up there in the front row, just karaokeing. And my son got to meet Hogan. He like talked to him for a little bit on the microphone in front of the people. Like, it was just like, is so cool. We're just like, our lives are just totally like wild, man. Like we're so normal, but we have these way wild moments where it's just like, life is so cool.
Yeah, man. And Hogan's mad cool, man, because he gave us, I mean,
we gave David a hat.
Yeah,
Hogan's hangout hat.
Bottles of Dom Perignon, and I mean, like,
everything was free for us.
He really
too.
treated us, awesome, man. So, and
him and his son remembered, like, me being from the beautiful people in TNA, because he introduced everybody, and he was like, oh yeah, because I mean, like, I lived in Tampa, so like there was more than a few times where like I would be on a plane, and like Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan would also be on the plane, so I would just like sit in the gate area and like talk to them, and like nobody doesn't know who Hulk Hogan is, you know what I mean? So like people were always coming up to him and stuff like that, and it was just like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, I remember watching him in movies and when I was like a kid, and then it's so wild to watch somebody on TV for so long, and then you get in the business, and then you just like see them on the regular and like talk to them like normal people, and you kind of have to walk away and just be like, I just need to like absorb that for a minute. It's just like wild. Yes. Never would have thought of this when I was 5,
No. I think that's where I got to. By the time us guys met up for a drink, I think my head had just exploded from days and days of having really nice conversations with really nice people who just happen to be people I'd watched on TV for 30 odd years. It's kind of crazy what I'm doing now, and I'm very grateful, much like you guys. I'm kind of living a crazy life of having lovely conversations with good people. I want to wrap it up with the last thing, which is you guys are obviously you're a wrestling tag team extraordinaire, but you're also very entrepreneurial, and you've got your various kind of businesses and hustles going on. Just tell my audience a little bit about some of the other ways they can support you through your businesses, especially you, Lauren.
Okay, well, you go first. He's got all the.
Yeah, I mean, well, we got a bunch of cool supplement lines. Check out. Chemex and Black Magic, blackmagicsubs.com, chemexlifestyle.com. Visit those. And then, obviously you can support us by going to psycholovewrestling.bigcartel.com. We got shirts, 8x10s, all the good stuff on there. And then, follow me on social media. It's at LOKEYS910 for Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Threads, all of those. And I think I got over 100 free matches on my YouTube now. So it's youtube.com/psychoboyfodder.
Yeah. And then I just have, my exclusive content websites in www.angelinaforever.com, at actual alove on Twitter, alove, the number 4life222 on Instagram. then I started like a tallow-based non-tox skincare line. I have an Etsy shop. It's called Simplified Essentials by Lauren is what it's called, but I think it's Essentials Simplified, all one word, on Etsy. I got a bunch of sunscreen I got to ship out today. So.
Well, there you go, guys. If you've enjoyed this conversation, then please support our guests. I will put all of this in the show notes. So go and check them out. Buy a t-shirt, buy an 8x10, buy some awesome stuff from Lauren's new range. So that's it today. Thank you so much to Psycho Love, otherwise known
Good to
as...
see you again, Ben.
Thanks a lot
Thank you.
for having us.
Thank you, guys. And wishing you all the best, not just in your wrestling life, but in your married life. And I look forward to doing another one of these in the future and finding out
For sure.
about your annoying habits that have come a few years later after the newlywed era. On
Right
such
on.
other sakes, thank you to my producer, Jeff Easter from Tall Lake Productions, for bringing Wrestling Life to life. Thank you to all of you for joining me today. Please subscribe, like, follow the show. We'll be back soon with more real talk from real talent. See you soon. Bye.
Peace.